Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition, and we're going to discuss eating fast food in a healthy way. So this is podcast 317. I probably needed to cover this one a long time ago. and part of the reason why is no matter how well you try to eat, and sometimes in short bursts of time, say before a competition or something, people can eat ridiculously cleanly. They can eat very well, make no mistakes, eat only food that they prepare. But that's not a lifelong sustainable behavior. So, being able to understand how to eat fast food or eat out, quote, so to speak, that's going to be very important as part of a process of just learning lifelong kind of nutrition skills. So we would love to find a way of understanding and controlling nutrition that allows us to find a balance between social health and physical health. So we've talked before about different areas of health. So there is physical health, there's emotional health, mental health, relational health, spiritual health, and those are the kind of the main ones that I talk about often, but I'm sure you could, come up with some other ones or redefine them in different categories in different ways. So relational health would be kind of related to social health. So can we have friends? Can we have social life, essentially? And we don't want to have such a restrictive nutrition style or method that we don't get to have friends. We don't get to go out and do fun things. Now, chances are you're going to do that anyhow. But what it often means for most people is they feel like they blew their diet, or they ruined their diet, or they made a mistake. And that's not a fun kind of mental framework to have, is every time you want to go out with friends, you feel like it's a negative towards a different part of your life. That's not good. So that's going to make you feel guilty, or it's going to kind of lessen the experience quality in some way. So if we can feel like we can still control our nutritional health while we're taking care of our social health and relational health, and have it be a positive thing, feel like we still have control, feel like we still have positive momentum towards our physical goals, that's going to be a much better mental framework, make us much healthier and happier internally. So that's going to be our goal. So what I want to cover in this podcast, like I said, is how to eat out in a healthy way. And like I said, if you feel like eating out is countering your nutritional health. Now, this is if you're not getting ready for a competition. So say just your general regular way of living. If you feel like eating out with friends is against your physical health, you're not going to have the happiest life that you can have available to you. So you need to change your mental framework in that way. So we're going to talk about how to kind of change the rules, or not even actually change the rules, just better understand how the rules of nutrition work and how you can actually achieve both goals. Being out with friends, having fun, but then also still staying on track with your nutritional health. So if you're the type who has a perfectionist mentality, you have to make sure that the rules of your nutrition allow you to go out and eat. So that way you can still feel perfect, you can still feel in control while being socially active. If your rules of nutrition exclude you being able to go out to eat, then you're always going to have to pick between kind of feeling like a failure on your diet but getting to see friends, or I get to be successful in my diet but I feel like a hermit and I have no friends. So people who have perfectionist mentalities, you have to be very careful in how you define nutrition. So that way you can still have a success mindset rather than a failure mindset. Okay? So it's not that we want you to, break rules or have lesser rules. We just want to understand them in a more clear-cut way so we can see how both can be achieved. Okay? So, the rules of how to eat fast food in a healthy way are actually just the same freaking rules we talk about a million times over in these podcasts about what are the healthy components of a diet. So we've talked before in podcast 41, titled Diet Right, What Matters Most. We kind of review the top concepts of a diet. What are the most important factors? Where do you get your biggest bang for your buck in terms of energy and effort and significance in diet? So the first thing that's most significant is calories. Okay? And in podcast 153, we discussed kind of how many calories do you need. So we've even discussed in a recent podcast about how to kind of track daily calories. So you can look that up as well. It's somewhere in the 300s. Then we have protein intake. So once I know my calories are controlled or accounted for, the second most important thing is, are you having enough protein in your diet? Okay, that matters more than whether something's organic or not. Or grass-fed beef versus whatever the hell, corn-fed beef. So, like, some of those things are important, but they're not as important as protein. So, too often people, they're starting to become more aware in our culture that calories are important and how to track calories, and they're making it easier and easier nowadays with, like, different types of apps. So, I was talking with somebody just yesterday. They were talking about a company called RPS, Renaissance Periodization Systems, I believe is what it stands for. But they have an app that kind of gives them their daily calories that they're supposed to have. It gives them their macro content, and then it tracks whether they record their meals or not. So if they don't record a meal, it shows up as like a mistake. So it kind of has an adherence component to it as well. So they give you kind of the if it fits your macros, IIFYM, if you've heard of that before. So it gives them their macros and calories, and then it also gives them an adherence component. Those are freaking awesome. That's fantastic. So now whether or not that stuff is accurate is debatable because they just use equations. So like everybody who's 6 foot tall, 185 pounds doesn't respond the same way to nutrition. So there has to be some personalization to it that often those programs can't physically do. So they can't write an individual nutrition program for 1 million people. So they use equations, and the equations get most people close enough to where they can have like a good beach body, but they're not going to probably use them to get sub 10% and get lean on stage. So, but they do have a ton of value for just controlling regular health. Okay, so we know calories are most important, protein is second most important, and then meal timing. So when are you eating your calories? That becomes the third most important component. Okay, we need to eat more when we move more, eat less when we move less. That's pretty much what that can sum up as. And in podcast 249, we discussed meal timing. I think I forgot to mention podcast 33 is protein, okay? So, and then from there on out, macronutrient quality. So whether you're eating the right types of carbs or the right types of fats, all that stuff is kind of in number 4, okay? So that's the order of what's most important when we want to have a healthy diet, and that's a diet for all goals. So whether I want to gain weight, but I'm hoping to gain, mostly muscle and the least amount of fat possible. These are still the same components you'd look for. Obviously, if you're losing weight, these are the same components. If you're looking for sport performance, if you're looking for an aesthetic, kind of peaking your aesthetic look, okay, so body composition, these are still the same components. So regardless of whatever your nutrition goal is, unless your goal is to become like the fattest person on the planet. Okay, these are the components that you would want to pay attention to. And actually, arguably, if you want to be the fattest person on the planet, you probably still have to follow these rules too, because calories would mean the most. And then if you weren't eating your protein, you wouldn't be maximally utilizing the carbs and fats for fat formation. So yes, so I can actually argue how these components are actually still helpful, even if you want to be the fattest person on the planet. So these are the components of a healthy, successful diet, and they are the same exact components of what we want to control when we're trying to eat fast food. Okay, so sometimes you'll hear people talk about the joke of when somebody will go to McDonald's and they'll order a Big Mac, but they'll get a Diet Coke. And our joke about that is the irony of like a Big Mac is not healthy at all, but then you think you're countering the unhealthiness of the Big Mac by having a Diet Coke. Well, there's actually some reasoning behind that. So by having a Diet Coke rather than a full sugared regular Coke, you're conserving an enormous amount of calories. And then also the calories that you're having from like Coca-Cola would just be pure sugar, which is not very helpful in like a health manner. So our body uses kind of glucose, which is broken down carbohydrates. And we can get into an argument over like ketones and all this other stuff. But in a sense, the energy source we use most commonly in our body is glucose. So we break the food we eat down into this molecule of glucose, which is a fancy word for sugar. So we do use sugar for energy, but I probably don't need like 80 grams of sugar in one drink of Coca-Cola in a 5 minute window. So there actually is some benefit to when people order a Big Mac with a Diet Coke. So we're going to go through and talk about that. So the first thing we want to look at when we eat out, okay, eat at like fast food, whether it's fast food chain like McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, stuff like that, or whether we're actually eating out at a restaurant, it's still eating out, kind of like. So these rules would apply in all of those scenarios. So the first thing we want to look for is controlling calories. Okay. Now this is going to kind of tie in with meal timing because it depends on the time of the day and what I'm doing at that day will kind of help me decide how many calories I need. So that's going to kind of all play in together. So as we talk through these rules, they're not like independent of each other. They have some crossover. They have some interrelation. So we'll kind of want to put all these rules together to be successful. So we'll talk about the individual rules, and then we'll kind of talk about bringing it all together to the bigger picture. So the first thing we have to do is control calories. And we can do so by doing portion control. So some people, when they go out to eat, they'll order like the regular full meal. And a lot of times on menus now, they'll even have a calorie count of the food of the meal. So you can go to restaurants or something like that, and you'll see that the meal you're ordering might be like 800 calories. And you're like, oh, I normally never would eat 800 calories in one meal. I typically maybe only eat like 400 or 500. Well, then that's fine. You just eat half the meal, get it in a to-go box, and then that becomes a meal for a later part of the day or a different day. So you can do portion control in that way, in which you eat what you would normally eat, but you only eat a portion of it. Hence the term. So you don't have to edit the meal, like where you get a Big Mac with a Diet Coke. This is a bad example, but the point will be made, is I could eat half the Big Mac, drink half the Coke, and then I could save that for later. So I could still have the food items that I quote unquote kind of want, or I want the pleasure of, or the excitement of, the fun of, but instead of me having to edit it, where I have like a lettuce wrap instead of like a tortilla wrap, if I just want the damn tortilla wrap because I want the damn tortilla wrap, so you can do that by just having portion control. So just eat the amount that you need at that time, save the rest for later. So that's one way of controlling calories. Another way of controlling calories is eliminating what we would consider secondary calories. So you have your food item that you really want. So like the main part of the food. So again, if we use the Big Mac and Coca-Cola example, the Big Mac is really where you're getting, like, that's your food. Okay, so that's the thing that's going to have the protein. That's the thing that's going to have the carbs and fats in it. Like, that's kind of the heart of the meal, if that makes sense. So the Big Mac is the main part of the meal. The Coca-Cola would be a secondary calorie. So if we think of like a meal from a restaurant, I might have burger and fries, okay, and a drink. Well, the burger is kind of the main part of the meal. The fries are a secondary thing, and any kind of drink would be a secondary thing. So what you can do is you can limit calories from your secondary item. So instead of having half of that whole meal, I could have the whole burger and then just not have the fries. So sometimes you'll hear women, this is who mostly does this, but there are men, of course, who do it. But it's kind of more common among women, where they'll have the burger, but they won't have the bun. So they'll skip the bun so they can have some fries. And there is some reasoning behind this. Now, do they actually know the amount of calories that they're swapping out? So maybe the bun is only 200 calories, but they're going to have 500 calories of french fries. So it's not a perfect equation, but it does make sense that if they don't give a crap about the bun very much, but they really want the damn fries, well, then that's a good trade-off. So rather than having the bun anyhow, even though you didn't want it, and then still eating the fries and having your calories be very high, they're going to eliminate the things they don't want. So sometimes that's a secondary items, sometimes it's part of the primary. So if you get rid of the bun off the burger so you can have the fries, a secondary item, that's fine too. So those are two common ways that people try to control calories. Is either portion control, so have the food that you want, but just have half of it at this time, or eliminating calories from like side items or secondary items. Okay, so those are two common ways that we can do it. Now, the next thing we look for is must contain protein. So we know protein is the second most important component of a successful diet. So if I don't pay attention to my protein content of this meal, I am not paying attention to the second freaking most important thing, which means it's still pretty dang important, okay? So we want to have some type of protein. And we talk about this in podcast 41. We discuss why protein is important. And a real quick rundown is protein fixes and repairs things in our body. It builds new structures. It does a whole bunch of other stuff too. So it regulates blood pressure, regulates pH balance in the blood. If you don't have enough protein in your diet, you're going to feel very watery and have like kind of excessive water retention around your midsection. You're also going to have inconsistent or less consistent energy levels throughout the day. You're going to have more mood swings. You're going to have less satiety or satiation, I guess would be the word. So you're not going to feel as full from your meals if you don't have as much protein. So you're going to be more likely to eat more often throughout the day and have higher amounts of cravings throughout the day. So there's a lot of benefit to having protein. So protein is important. You have to pay attention to it, okay? So one of the ways is just making sure whatever you're eating has some meat to it, assuming you're not a vegetarian or vegan. And grilled meats are better than fried meats. So fried meats are going to have excess fats in them because of the oil or whatever they're using to fry the meat with. So a grilled meat is cleaner, okay? Meaning it's not going to have secondary calories to it like the fats from the oils. So when possible, grilled meats are better than fried meats and grilled meats are better than breaded meats. So breading involves, again, still oil, but then also adds in carbs now from the breading. So that's a double whammy of no good. So grilled meats are always better than fried meats. Now, if you are a vegetarian, now there's a difference between vegetarian and vegans. So vegetarian, there's vegetarians who, like there's lacto-vegetarian, there's ovo-vegetarian, there's lacto-ovo, there's pesky. So there's a bunch of, pesky, by the way, is fish. But there's different types of vegetarians out there. So depending on how you define yourself as a vegetarian, you would still want to try to have a protein source that you would allow yourself. So sometimes if people went to like a Mexican restaurant, they would get like a burrito that has cheese and beans in it, and that would provide them some of their protein. Or they would even get tofu, okay? So you want to make sure that you account for some type of protein intake. And for most vegans and vegetarians, they're going to be aware of their proteins because when you take on that lifestyle, you're most likely going to be told that protein is important and told on different ways in which to get protein in. So, but that's what you want to do is you want to make sure you have some protein accounted for in your meal. Okay, if you're a vegan, good freaking luck. So it can still be done. But like for example, if you went out to like Chipotle or Moe's Southwest Grill, but where you get like Mexican, sometimes where people who are vegan will get in trouble in terms of excessive calories is they'll want to get like a wrap. So maybe a burrito, and they know that beans and rice are kind of their way of getting like a protein pairing to make sure they can make a complete protein. But beans and rice both come with carbs, and then if you put that inside of a tortilla wrap, holy shit, you're having a lot of carbs in one meal. So that's where cases like the lettuce wrap are a good way to kind of, you can still do beans and rice to get your protein, but you do the lettuce wrap rather than a tortilla wrap because that helps to reduce your carb intake. So that's a way of trying to control calories is by swapping out certain foods. So I could do an example of swapping out a lettuce wrap for a tortilla wrap. So that would give me a chance to where I'd have the beans and rice to get my protein content, and it would also provide my carbs, but I can also control my overall carb intake of the meal by having a lettuce wrap rather than a tortilla wrap. So these are just examples or some things to think of, but that's going to be kind of like the first two components is can we control our calories and can we make sure we have protein in our meal? Now, the third thing is meal timing, and that factors into quote unquote controlling our calories. So how do we know how many calories we should have? Okay, so first of all, go listen to podcast 153 because we already said to do that. So that would tell you how many calories you're supposed to kind of have throughout the day in a normal healthy diet, whether you're eating out or not. So that'll give you an idea of, okay, typically at meals I have X number of calories. So if I'm supposed to eat 2,000 calories a day, I have 4 meals. That means I get 500 calories per meal. Okay, so that gives me my reference point. Then from there, if I'm very active at that time, so if we're eating fast food because we're out and we're out and about and we're moving around, we're doing energy, using energy, then I can be up towards the top end of my calorie intake or even a little over. So if my average is 500 calories per meal, but if I'm mostly active during the day, I could have 600 to 700 calories at those meals. At the times of the day when I'm least active, say late at night, I could have 300 to 400 calories. So we've talked about before with calories, if my activity level throughout the day follows a bell curve, meaning my activity is low in the morning, it gets higher in the middle of the day, then goes back down to low at night, then I want my calories to match that same curve. So rather than me having a flatline calorie count throughout the entire day, where I have 500 for breakfast, 500 for lunch, 500 for dinner, something like that, I can have a curve where it's maybe only 300 for breakfast, 800 for lunch, 300 for dinner, something like that. So as an example, is where you're trying to match your caloric intake to your energy level. So if I know I'm more active, then I can have a higher amount of calories at that meal. Okay, so if I know my average is say 500, I can go a little above that, which gives me like say 600 or so, and that makes sense because I'm more active, I'm using more fuel. Now, if I'm eating out, but I'm not active, I'm not really doing anything, you're just riding in a car, or you're eating out and then about to go sit in the movie theater and sit on your butt for 2 hours, then you probably want to have less calories. And this makes sense as if I'm not using my machine of my body, if I'm not using it a lot, I don't have to put a lot of fuel in. So if I'm at an inactive activity, I'm in an inactive time of the day, I want to have a lower than normal caloric intake. So this makes sense. If I'm more active than baseline, I would have more calories than my baseline. If I'm less active than my baseline, I would have less calories than my baseline. So just kind of common sense, but not often something that people really are aware of. And most people will not take the damn time to go listen to podcast 153 and figure out what their calories should be. Okay? So you're going to say like, well, I feel like I'm eating more, or I feel like I'm eating less. Yeah, but if you have no freaking clue of a number, you're just bullshitting yourself. So if I were to tell you, oh, okay, you're eating less, well, less than what? How many calories should you have? Well, I typically eat, I typically would have had like the whole burger and all the fries, but I just had, the burger and then like half the fries. Okay, so you took a big fat shot in the dark and you're hoping to God you made a good choice, but you don't actually know. You want to live your whole damn life that way? You probably are already, but that's not the best way to live your life, okay? By just shooting in the dark. You're gonna hit some things you don't want to hit every now and then, and you're gonna miss some things that you would wanted to hit every now and then. So it's better to have an idea of what your numbers are, so that way you can know whether you're eating more than the baseline or below the baseline. So if you don't know what your baseline is, okay, that's your own damn fault, because I've told you a million times how to go figure that out. So, go figure that out. But that's what you need to do, okay? And one of the ways I think of it is kind of like a summary or a kind of an easy concept, in my opinion, is I want to eat the amount needed to get me to my next meal. So if I'm eating out, but I know I'm going to eat again, or I'm going to have the opportunity to eat again in 3 hours, I only want to eat enough food that'll get me to 3 hours. So I don't have to pig out. Like I just eat a little bit here, and that way I'll still be hungry in 3 hours. Or if I'm eating out now, and I know it's going to be 5 or 6 hours till I can get my next meal, then I have to eat more, okay? So that's another way of thinking of it, is you can think if I'm above baseline active, I'm going to eat above my baseline calories. If I'm below baseline active, I'm going to eat below my baseline calories. Or I can think, what do I need to eat to get to my next meal? So when's the next chance I have to eat? So if I can eat like in 2 hours and have it be something healthy at home, then I'll eat something really quick, really small, out and about right now, and then go in 2 hours to eat my bigger, healthier meal. So I kind of will do that as well. So that's what you want to think of is meal timing. Okay, the third most important component of nutrition is just paying attention to what you need at that time. So if you're active, eat more. If you're inactive, eat less. Okay, if you can eat something healthier in 2 hours, eat way less now, and then go eat something healthier in 2 hours. Okay? Now, the last thing we think of is the fourth component of a successful diet is macronutrient quality. This is like, okay, what are the good carbs versus bad carbs? Good fat versus bad fat. So this is where somebody might say, well, I'm going to have a burger, but I'm going to have a wheat bun instead of a white bread bun. Does that matter? That's debatable, okay? So if you do the first three components correctly and you want to do the fourth, right or wrong, okay, that's a choice. Okay, you can do that. If it makes you feel better, great. Okay, but if you don't control the first three components and you skip over calories, you skip over protein, you're not even really paying attention to meal timing at all, and you just say, well, I'm going to be healthy because I'm going to eat a wheat bun instead of a white bun, but you haven't done any other thinking to your nutrition and you're not paying attention to any other components, you're an idiot because you're focusing on the wrong thing. And the difference you're about to make by eating wheat bread versus white bread is probably meaningless. So you're a fool, and we've talked about this already a million times over. If you want to tell yourself the lie that eating wheat bread versus white bread is meaningful enough that it'll make a difference, but you're not controlling any of the other components, you're an idiot. No one's going to like that because it's easier to just order a wheat bread versus a white bread than to figure out how many calories you're supposed to have, rather than figuring out how much protein you're supposed to have, rather than having to like hold yourself back from eating the amount you really want right now, even if it's not the right timing. So you're like, well, I just want to eat what I want to eat. And I don't want to have to pay attention to carbs and fats and proteins, and I don't want to have to care about my calories. So I'm just going to do a wheat bun instead of a white bun, and I know that's healthier. You don't know shit. So if you haven't done any other equations, you haven't figured anything else out, you're a fool, you're lying to yourself, and the thing that you think you're changing is probably making a 1% difference. Okay? So, I know I'm being very aggressive in my language, but I'm annoyed because people do this all the time. And then they wonder why I just don't seem to lose weight. Like, diets just don't work for me. No, that is not a thing. Okay? Calories work for everybody. Protein works for everybody. If you think diets don't work for you, that's because you're not paying attention to what the hell you're doing, or you're following some dumbass scheme of a diet, and you're not paying attention to the rules that I give you guys. So diets work for anyone and for everyone. When you don't think diets work, it's because you're not working. You're not figuring out the details. You are not doing the work needed. It's not the diet. Don't blame the diet. Blame yourself. Now, if you're doing diets correctly, you're figuring out all the stuff that we were telling you to figure out, and somehow it's not working, then go get your blood tested, okay? So you might have a low thyroid, and if you're not taking medication for it, that can cause issues. So you could have a thyroid issue, so go get blood checked if you feel like you're doing everything correct in your diet and still not seeing anything. Now, if you do end up having a low thyroid and you take medication for it, you're totally fine. That's what the medication does, is it fixes your thyroid. So you then can't complain, oh, I have a low thyroid, that's why I gain weight. No, if you have medicine for it, you don't have a low thyroid anymore. Your thyroid's fine. That's what you're taking medicine for, okay? So, but if you do think diets don't work for you, and you're actually putting in the work, first of all, congratulations for putting in the work. Second of all, that really sucks that it's still not working. I do understand that. So go get your blood checked and see if you have a low thyroid, okay? But in the grand scheme of things, macronutrient quality, whether you have a wheat bun versus white bun or sweet potato fries versus white potato fries, that's laughable, by the way. They're both soaked in fat. So just eat whatever the hell you're going to eat. So the most important components is controlling calories, making sure you have enough protein, and then paying attention to your meal timing, which will help you know how much food you should have. Okay, and then also with the meal timing, if you're being more active, you can eat carbs. If you're less active, you can eat fats. So that's another thing you can do to try to help get better results. Okay, so that is how we eat fast food healthy. Is we pay attention to the components we already are aware of, and we've already told a million times over that are important. Okay, so just pay attention to your calories. Make sure you have some protein in your meal, and then figure out your meal timing. So how many calories do you need for what you're doing at this time? Okay, so that's how